Sonic Forces stress test. After Knuckles boringly monologues in his thoughts in front of the Master Emerald, thinking it's quiet here and that it's been a while since he's been roped into one of Sonic's adventures, Silver shows up and tells him they need help against Eggman. Out of nowhere, Knuckles asks where Angel Island went, and he and Silver see the village of the ancient echidnas from SA1 nearby, when Silver didn't time travel them into the past, and just came to his time. This better be explained, because when it's not explained right away, it looks like arbitrary fanfiction. Because I doubt Sonic Forces ever implied this happened. And being different is good, but it needs to be actually logical. Then Chaos attacks Knuckles, being in a bad mood all of a sudden when Knuckles was trusting him earlier. Huh? So they get into a fight. I would call it an intriguing mystery, but this franchise's plot hole's central, so usually my questions go unanswered. Silver says gotcha while seeming to use his telekinesis, but Chaos smacks him with water from a puddle anyways. I don't understand. He has telekinesis. That would mean that he'd be able to hold Chaos completely still. But I guess it makes sense that as a water god, Chaos would be able to control a puddle and make it smack water into him at a high enough speed to hurt him, even if he's being held still. Because he controls water with his mind, not requiring any hand gestures to do so. And Chaos is living water. Even when he gets scattered by being attacked, he just stays alive when he turns into a puddle and moves away. So Silver breaking apart his current form with telekinesis wouldn't kill him either. Okay, I can make sense of this. Chaos is magical enough to give Silver a hard time. Knuckles tells him to get him a clear shot at Chaos's brain. A brain that can magically materialize again after disappearing whenever Chaos is reduced to a moving puddle or just looks like a pond. Even in that state he's alive. So the brain is just for show. But for some reason it manifests in physical form sometimes. And all that does is give Chaos a weak spot. When if it always stayed in the form of a puddle, he'd be invincible because he'd have no brain to hit. And I guess the functions of his brain would be in his soul and on a different plane of existence. The point is, now that I think about it because of how long this unoriginality is dragged on, Chaos was being an idiot by ever presenting himself in a form that his brain be in a physical form and had no reason not to always attack in the form of an invincible puddle on the ground. Knuckles saying this just makes Chaos look stupid in Sonic Adventure as a whole, which makes its plot look worse, because he doesn't always have this weak spot, so why does he make himself have it? I guess because Chaos personally thinks he looks cool when he takes these physical forms, so he's going for style over logic. It's the same reason the writer made him do this and be Chaos Zero. I have a question. He was just around the Master Emerald, so why is he merely Chaos Zero? So what was ever stopping him from powering up to a more powerful form with the Master Emerald? In RG it was like 11 Chaos Emeralds fused together, and so since it was technically still made a Chaos Emerald, it could still do stuff like make Sonic go super, and even in the games it could still power a giant mecha. And yet both times that Chaos was near the Master Emerald, he didn't power himself up with it. What about the magical Master Emerald makes it impossible for a water god to go perfect Chaos with it? Scourge turned green with it and expected us to believe he got more powerful from it, so why not a water god too? I guess when Chaos was sealed in the Master Emerald, part of the spell kept him from interacting with it to power himself up, while he was trapped near it in water vapor form by a force field really close to and around the Master Emerald. The only way it could work. Maybe the lingering effect of that spell is that he still can't power up with a Master Emerald. That's how Tikal's spell had to be. Still, that's part of the downside to making a story too much like the games. It just made me notice a plot hole in Sonic Adventure, which made its plot retroactively seem worse when it could have been original instead. So this is a point where reference is actually harmful. Literally anybody could write a plot like this, where someone has the Chaos Zero fight all over again, except it's someone other than Sonic this time. And it's even the same setting Chaos has been in already. Why doesn't Silver use telekinesis on his brain? It's a physical form, and he gets hurt when he gets hit in it. So presumably, him telekinesising it apart would kill him. Moron. I guess he can't telekinesis something that's inside of something, and only put his telekinesis power onto the outside of something. But he's made of water, liquid. It's permeable, so the telekinesis field should be going inside of the water anyways. Can I get told why Chaos is tantruming against heroes? He know they were good guys. Were any Chow hurt near here? Why did Chaos warp away? Why didn't he Chaos Control away earlier? The Chaos Control looks like a green flash of light, not red stars. Oh right, he was in Illusion Sonic Forces. It's been forever since I saw the trailer. But you'd think he wouldn't be made to give up so easily. An illusion would be able to be kept up forever because it's just an illusion, a solid hologram. So it would have no hit point limit. It could be infinitely resummoned, even. It's air forced to be solid. But Neps does have super strength, so fine. I guess the village is an illusion too. And whoever's summoning the illusions doesn't actually care about guaranteeing he wins by repeatedly summoning the illusions. And he probably knows that the heroes would run away instead of continuing to fight for an eternity. I forgot Chaos was just an Illusion Forces because I never watched its cutscenes, since I don't like Sonic's voice in the newer games, and Sonic's stories tend to suck anyways, and I wanted to just beat the game quickly. Also I forgot because while I did learn about it, him being an illusion instead of the real thing was probably underwhelming and lame. So something that anticlimactic and only there for a plot twist for the sake of a plot twist would naturally end up being forgettable. The mind would rather remember him as being the real thing because that's more epic. Even if Chaos being just an illusion makes way more logical sense than an excuse for Chaos to work for Eggman again while ignoring the past history reason why that couldn't happen. Because he's not really Chaos. He could have just as easily been a parallel universe Chaos who didn't turn on Eggman yet. That'd have been better. If Chaos and the Village are just illusions from Infinite, then that's something that anyone familiar with the game that's comics ripping off would be able to figure out on their own, eventually. And it's only going to remain a mystery to the people who aren't familiar with that game, or at least are naive enough to be hopeful that there's a more interesting explanation for this village being there than it being fake, just because game. Like, Angel Island could have been merged with a parallel universe version of Mobius that's far behind in time, resulting in that village replacing some of its scenery. But I can't imagine why two universes would merge. Like, who'd have anything to gain from that? It was already arbitrary when Sonic X did it. The point is, since this mystery is so easily explainable while also just confusing you, there's not much of a point to the story not explaining right away what the deal is with Chaos in that village. It doesn't come off like a mystery. It comes off like a plot hole that the story's refusing to fill for no reason. A good mystery is one where it looks like there could be a believable logical explanation, and so you have reason to have faith in the story to eventually give us one. Like, who stole Sonic's shoe? Here, we're not shown Infinite in the story and told that he can create illusions. So these problems look like they come out of nowhere as arbitrary nonsense until you remember, oh yeah, illusions can exist. I don't like to think in meta logic. If you think in meta logic, well, oh, the story is based on Sonic Forces. Of course it has a Forces concept, but it hasn't done anything exclusively Sonic Forces yet. It's a different universe from the games. So I'm not running on Sonic Forces logic yet. Silver tells Knuckles that something happens in this time that brings the world to ruin. They're doing this with Silver again? Don't they get bored of this? But the historical records remaining are sparse or make no sense. If the world was literally ruined, there'd be no historical records and Silver wouldn't have existed. But I know what he means. Except, wait a minute, he had to have come from a pocket of surviving civilization. Why wouldn't that civilization have tons of books with all the world's history rewritten into them? Of course, if the world gets trashed, the internet would go, but libraries would still survive, and so would schools. Some of those would have survived, and history books would be there. But I guess it can be possible that none of the libraries in school survived. Not a single one. He came back in time to hopefully save the future. So, how did he come back in time? The story's not gonna answer that? Hello? Where's the good writing? Even Sonic 06 is written better than this. At least there, it was shown that Mephiles let him travel back in time. Archie explained this too, in two different ways. Why isn't he holding a time stone right now? Fleetway had that for explaining time travel. Fleetway explained that he used a time machine that some scientists made him. This, on the other hand, is not even trying. Why doesn't Knuckles ever ask him how he time traveled? That's basic conversation. This is the first story in the comic that Silver's appeared in, so the writer needed to establish how he got here. Knuckles says that he wouldn't have known about anything happening on the surface until it was too late. Why does he assume this? I guess because Silver went back in time from a future that was ruined, and so Knuckles is reasoning that Silver had to come warn him to prevent that future. So if it weren't for Silver, Knuckles' friends would have been killed and prevented from ever warning him. Knuckles assumes that his involvement must be crucial to saving the world because Silver warned him about a bad future. This provides a good explanation for why he's going to leave the island and lead the resistance against the bad future, even if he's not known for being a leader. And it leaves the island without the Master Emerald, a gigantic idiot ball that leads to Eggman going to take it. We saw Knuckles holding the Master Emerald in SE2, and it was as small as a Chaos Emerald, proving that he could shrink it at will and carry it around with him. With that in mind, there's no reason he wouldn't have used his Guardian powers to shrink it and take it with him to continue guarding it. Even in Sonic X, he carries the whole Master Emerald, even though it's just as big as you'd expect it to be, so even that doesn't stop him. I know for a fact that him casually abandoning guarding the emerald was confusing for people, and it could have easily not been. Him wanting to help was explained, but not this. True, most of the time he abandons the emerald, it doesn't get stolen, implying that Eggman stopped caring about taking it since he barely ever does. But Knuckles could have at least buried it somewhere first. I understand him being desperate to go on an adventure because his life is horribly boring and he was just thinking that it's been a while. But there's no reason he couldn't have at least thrown the Master Emerald into the ocean. That way no one could get at it and he'd know it was below Angel Island and could go ask Tails to go there in a submarine to get it back when he wants. Why does he think he has to keep it in its pedestal and keep the island afloat? I assume it's floating over the ocean right now, and it didn't end up destroyed when it fell into the ocean in SA1, so let it fall. This is a problem with the comic having the games referenced by it. The game's lore introduces plot holes when the comic contradicts it. Eggman fortunately says that the first test of the Phantom Ruby's power was a success. And while he doesn't outright say what illusions he created, you can assume for yourself what they were. So it is kinda explained. It's not actually trying to keep a mystery going. Eggman outright says that he doesn't even need to bother with the Master Emerald with the power of the Phantom Ruby. Never mind that the Master Emerald could power some powerful machines. So it'd still be stupid of him to not take it when it's right there. But with that line, if he doesn't use it, it'd be pointless to write Knuckles to lose it to him. And Eggman's victory of the Emerald wouldn't be well earned because it wouldn't be believable. It only happened because Knuckles had an idiot ball, and that always makes for cheap drama. So, was Silver an illusion too? Nah, that need have killed Knuckles. Wait, that just made me realize, why didn't Eggman summon an illusion version of Silver to kill him with telekinesis instantly? And kill every hero with telekinesis instantly by snapping their necks? I guess the illusions can't replicate the magical powers. They can only look like them. So that's why Chaos didn't turn into a puddle. He wasn't really Chaos. Just some solid air that looked like him through a holographic projection. The ending of a story needs to be very careful about not leaving a bad impression because that'll tarnish how you feel about the rest of the story because the ending's the most recent thing you saw. Of course, the beginning really needs to be good too, because a bad first impression makes the whole story hard to push through and gets you in a bad mood for the rest of it. This issue is by Ian Flynn, with the story being credited as by Sonic Team again. And was about Knuckles being convinced to leave the island and lead the resistance against Eggman because Silver came back in time to warn him that the world would be in ruin in the future. And Knuckles assumes that he'll be necessary to prevent that, because in Silver's timeline, him warning Knuckles never happened. And he's arrogant. He could easily be making a false assumption and it's not his help that's needed. But I can't blame Knuckles for assuming this since he has super strength that would be very useful. And Silver's at least written to say that he's not sure his leading would be what's necessary. The problem with the story was that, as I expected, its lazy writing made its ending confusing and forced. The writer's too lazy to explain how Silver traveled back in time, which even Sonic 06 explained. And that plot was more interesting than this. This is literally just someone fights Chaos Zero again. And more importantly, it's completely baffling that Knuckles would leave the Master Emerald unprotected. Sure, he's done that before in the games, but that was stupid there too, and there was technically no proof that he wasn't keeping it shrunken in his shoe, or magically hidden in his aura in energy form. Which has to be what he was doing to keep all of those shards with him in the adventure games, because otherwise he would have had his hands too full of shards to have done anything if he was just carrying them the normal way. Not to mention, since the Master Emerald is so big, shards of the Master Emerald, their size would add up after a while, so you'd be able to see him carrying the shards, even if he had his hands collapsed over them. So they have to be able to shrink, canonically. Like, he's keeping them in hammer space, basically. That's canon. So he would just keep the emerald in hammer space again. And as usual, it's stupid that he hasn't already asked Tails to have a security system built around the Master Emerald to automatically defend it, with lasers and a giant robot. I was surprised that Knuckles did have a good justification for agreeing to leave the island. I know he can be a leader because he led the Chaotix in Archie. But the problem that gets people confused about this anyways is that he didn't leave with the Master Emerald. He could have buried it at least. I wouldn't be as confused about this if it didn't start out with him guarding the Master Emerald. Like, he could be somewhere else, which would be going off of what the more modern games like Lost World were doing. He could have buried it at least. He could have hid it into shards and used his guardian powers to keep the shards with him and buried the shards all over the place. I know he can dig and drill into the ground, so he could have buried it in a really deep hole. Of course, the patch of dirt that clearly marked buried treasure would have to be obscured by something like a bush or a boulder afterwards for that to work, but he could do it. He has super strength. Eggman better use the Master Emerald for something, because if not, this could have easily not been written. If Eggman did take the Emerald, it was just the first instance of a dark thing happening that was forced, that matters, because it only happened from Knuckles being made too stupid out of nowhere. So if this was supposed to give me respect for Eggman as a villain because he's being competent, it's not working because the story had to cheat to get him that victory. It's not him being smart, it's Knuckles being too dumb. It's just like Sonic Adventure, where he only gets the emeralds because the main character is ready to stand there like morons doing nothing to stop him, multiple times. And he seems to be portrayed as calm and reasonable, like SA2 Knuckles here. He's not Idiot Knuckles right now, so that's what makes it confusing. For the most part, the story was alright. Just boring with this chaos fight because nothing new was happening. It was just punches for both of them. And I knew it wouldn't have the guts to get any of the characters injured, and it didn't. So there's no point to the fight. Knuckles won so easily that it could have been removed from the plot with no difference, and the fight wasn't interesting. That's part of what could make it outright forgettable, compared to the mistake Knuckles made at the end. He's not just some guy, he's a guy who dedicated his life to protecting this gem. I don't see why they couldn't have had Silver defeat Chaos by using telekinesis on its brain itself. Knuckles' victory was so easy with barely anything happening in the fight besides just repeatedly punching each other. The fight would have been much faster, but that's why it could have been written so that Silver would show up much later. He could show up at the very end.